Welcome to the new For Purpose CEO podcast.
I'm Michelle.
I am Danielle, and we are here to talk about being a CEO in the for-purpose sector. Each episode, we will talk about issues not-for-profit and for-purpose CEOs need to manage based on our 30-plus years of experience. It will be an honest discussion of the highs and the lows, helping you tackle the unique challenges of running a NFP.
Leading can be challenging and sometimes lonely. We get it. Join us and our guests weekly for an honest discussion about running a for-purpose organisation. We will be sharing practical tips, shared experiences and real-world stories to help you tackle the unique challenges of running a for-purpose organisation. We're going to talk about volunteers.
The social capital that I think most not-for-profits depend on, or their origin story, has actually most likely derived from volunteers.
I have never worked with an organisation that doesn't have volunteers in the for-purpose space.
Same. And you often hear when you operate within the for-purpose and not-for-profit space, organisations will tell their story of how they came about. And most of the time it is, whether it be community members coming together to meet a specific purpose, and they volunteered, and the organisation then evolved and grew out of that, but they still have a connection to volunteerism or volunteers and still have that as a fundamental to their organisation. So I think what we're saying is that volunteers are core.
Absolutely. I think volunteers are core to the for-purpose sector. I think they're unique in the sense that I think that if you are coming from the corporate sector, then this is probably something that you might not have dealt with, or you might not have dealt with in the same scale or the same way. So you might have had people on placement, for example, or you might have had students who come in for a period of time, but you probably wouldn't deal with volunteers in the same way that I think they exist in the for-purpose space.
That's right. And if you've come from a corporate, you might have been a volunteer or you've done volunteering yourself. So you're on the other side of the table. So you understand it from the volunteer's perspective, but you need to think about it also strategically as a CEO in a for-purpose organisation about access to and utilisation of volunteers and the contribution of value they can provide to your organisation. Like Volunteering Australia reports that there are around 5 million people that volunteer through formal contributions. So that's quite a significant contribution.
It's huge. And I think that we really need to acknowledge, as people who work in the for-purpose space, how much volunteers also contribute and assist the sector. That obviously, from a purely financial perspective, we're not paying salaries to these people, but there's so many jobs that volunteers do. There's so many different tasks, and everything skilled, unskilled, fundraising. I mean, I guess we should just say, like, I've always had volunteers in the organisations that I've worked with in the for-purpose sector, and they have been the widest range of people doing the widest range of roles. But I also think engaged in different ways. So you might have someone who comes in every Friday morning to do a set task, or maybe to do some data entry, or, to do some filing. But I've also had volunteers who are skilled bookkeepers who've come in to do all the bookkeeping once a week, and that obviously is a huge saving to the organisation. But, you have student placement. They might be there for a term. There might be university people who are getting experience and really have the potential to actually produce something quite amazing for your organisation, like some piece of research or write a paper or just help with the things that need doing.
That's right. And there are not-for-profits who use volunteers in the delivery of their services as well. And that's relatively dominant actually in aged care, in-home care. So whether it be mowing lawns, so there will actually be volunteers who do the gardening and mowing lawns, or whether it be delivering meals, or whether it be social connection. Those types of services are also delivered by volunteers, and that keep the organisation being able to meet its purpose and deliver, but is contributing a really impactful service to the recipients of those who are getting that service.
It is a two-way street in the sense that, for many years I've worked with a whole range of different volunteers, and they love it. They love what they're doing. But I do feel that there's a huge responsibility on you as an organisation to ensure that you deliver a good experience for your volunteers, that they're well managed, that they're looked after. And I think, if you step up as a new CEO, one of the things I think you really have to look at is who is in the organisation, like what volunteers do you have, what sort of volunteers do you have, what jobs are they doing, how are they managed? Because that's a huge resource for your organisation.
And we were talking earlier about the types of volunteers and the channels of which volunteers exist. So one of those we talked about obviously was student placements, so university students who need to do a placement as part of their degree, or students who want to do some volunteering to build the skill, and some universities actually have sort of as part of their career department.
But I think even just on that, I think that's to also flag that there's a lot of work on the part of the organisation.
Yes.
If you have student placements who come in for a term or a semester, you have to understand what they need to do to meet their requirements. And so that's also quite a piece of work. And obviously, if you get that up and running, or other people get it up and running, or you come into it, you really need to make sure that you're also delivering for them.
Definitely. And, student placements, the university will have learning objectives that need to be achieved, and you need to be able to put forward the type of work and the tasks in order to be able to meet those learning objectives. But also, a student placement can be anything from 4 weeks to 12 weeks, and then it has a clear end date. And so you potentially could be having, 4 to 6 student placements through the year. And so you need some resourcing around managing that and the types of tasks that they do. I have heard stories where students have walked into not-for-profits as a student placement, and then they've been asked to basically wash the dishes. And that's, as much as that is a valuable task, none of us want a dirty kitchen in an organisation. That's not the role for the student. It might be a task, but it's not the role.
But it's hard. It's hard. If you get students, and if you get students who are unexperienced in doing the work, then it's up to you to train them. It's up to you to find a task that is meaningful to their study and to what they're there to do. And so they should be able to understand, your service delivery, what you're about, what you're doing, but also to manage them in a way that also isn't adding hugely to the burden of your existing staff as well. So it is a bit of a balance.
And they do require supervision, because you do have inexperienced people coming, first day, they don't know where anything is, they don't know what to do. So it needs a clear induction schedule as well. So student placements, you do need to turn that over. But my organisation uses student placement, and we have a coordinator who sits over that role specifically. You don't necessarily need somebody dedicated. You might have someone where it's part of their job, that's what they do. But we put a business case together to demonstrate that that investment was an extraordinary saving to the organisation to have those students come in and do that work. But we get an amazing value out of the students in terms of we train them up to be able to answer basic queries, answering the phone, run client activities, go in and support staff with overflow work. As a result of that has actually channeled some of those students as they finish their placement, as we've been recruiting, that we've actually been able to recruit them into paid positions. And that has been almost like a 12-week induction schedule. And so they're not necessarily hitting the ground running on day one, but a lot of the work has already been done because they know the organisation, what we do, the clients and the people. And so that's a huge productivity gain.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. And also then if you do take them on, they're partway through their training already, if you like. So that's amazing, a part of their onboarding experience. I think the other thing is, as you're talking about this, I was thinking about it, is the motivation behind why your volunteers are there. And I think that's really important to understand. So if you come into a workforce and understanding why certain volunteers are there. So it might be that, at one organisation we had someone who came in, there was many different volunteers, but I remember on Friday in particular, we seemed to have a lot more volunteers, and they would do sort of the week of data entry, or one person did some bookkeeping. And for them, the motivation for coming in and doing that and helping was that they actually loved what they did. They felt very connected to the organisation. It was a huge help to us. But I also think we had to balance as well that they were doing tasks and jobs that we needed to be done every week. And so, if they weren't there one week, because, people are allowed to go on holiday or be sick, that it's also part of, if you've come in and you've got a volunteer workforce, how are they managed? Like, what happens if they don't show up? What's that process? And depends on the size of the organisation, whether or not you're going to have someone, as you say, dedicated to that or who does it as part of their role. But I think your job as the CEO is to make sure those systems are in place. Are the jobs really clear? What is done by volunteers? What happens if they don't show up? How are they trained? How are they inducted? How are they onboarded? And I think that's really, really important to make sure that's working, because if they do things well, the volunteers are such a fabulous, fabulous resource and save so much for a for-purpose organisation.
That's right, absolutely. And there are many channels to get volunteers. So I think there's also, we were talking earlier around there's work for the dole. So where a person who is receiving income support or unemployment benefits has a mutual obligation, so they can go and do a certain amount of hours in a not-for-profit or an NGO organisation. And if that's the case, that's your organisation working with another very highly regulated system, which is employment services. That can bring some great benefits. I've had work for the dole where one of the participants was so enormously, hugely skilled, and he got a job as a result because he had recent relevant experience and references. He ended up getting a job that was paying way more than I was. And we laughed about it. So I was so proud of him. But the administration to get work for the dole was quite intense on the organisation. Having the work for the dole participant, because we were working with a highly regulated employment services system. So you need to kind of be prepared for that. There is administration that does come with volunteers. Depending on the channel that you work with will determine how much administration and how you can actually resource that. And then we were talking about sort of corporate volunteerism as well. And we were having a conversation. Does that fit within volunteering or does that fit within fundraising? I've not used corporate volunteerism, so that's something that's quite uncommon for me.
I've experienced it in a number of ways, but I have experienced it very significantly driving fundraising in the sense that you might have a partner, corporate partner, and there'll be the financial partner, maybe they're donating, or you'll set up an experience, which I'm a big one on. The experience has to relate to the purpose of the organisation. So it should be directly related to what you do, and it shouldn't just be, go and paint a kindy, unless, for example, you're running kindies. But normally, in my experience, what will happen is that you might come in and host 10, 20, 30 people who do an activity which is related to your organisation. It gives you a chance to explain your organisation and lets them better understand the organisation, build a connection with your organisation. But also that the organisation will pay for that. That's their donation. They're paying for the experience, but it's a donation to your organisation as a not-for-profit or as a for-purpose organisation. So corporate volunteering is often going to be part of that fundraising piece.
So that's therefore then also a very different skill set. So if you as a not-for-profit or for-purpose organisation wanted to strategically engage with corporate volunteering, that's a different skill set to coordinate, to build the relationships, to coordinate and stand those types of activities up, as opposed to working with universities for student placement, as opposed to reaching out to the community and recruiting that way.
Completely different. So, organisations I've worked with, they might have volunteers who, for example, go to markets and they have a stall and their purpose is information but fundraising as well. So that's obviously a specific sort of volunteer as well, someone who really likes to talk to people, someone who's quite happy to really communicate with people they don't know, people who are happy to ask for donations. Not everyone's happy to do that. Very different from having a relationship with corporate. So having corporate partners where you might have an agreement which says 2 or 3 times a year you will take X number of people for an experience, and in return they will make a donation of a certain amount. I think there's a different level of organisation required there. So you have to be prepared to understand what resources you can put into this part of the fundraising, this corporate volunteering. And the other corporate volunteering that I've seen and taken advantage of as well is there's a number of corporates who have skilled volunteering. So they may give a day, or they may give a period of time where someone, for example, someone who's amazing at IT strategy or someone who's really amazing at external communications, they will lend you a person, whether it's for a period of time, full time or 1 day a week for a period of time, and they can come in and just uplift what you have as the for-purpose organisation. And then you can kind of take it, run it yourself. And so I've found that also to be really helpful. And there's a lot of, the big banks do that, the big corporates do that, where they have this skilled volunteering or skilled placement where they'll come in and they've got, amazingly bright, talented people with good experience who can come in and help you or talk through your options or set up a better way to do things. I worked for an organisation where we had a fabulous corporate partner who came in and looked at all our systems and then gave us options on how we could be more efficient. And I mean, that was hugely valuable. It was a long-term relationship, but short-term projects where you bring in and you go, okay, we don't have this expertise in-house. Who has this expertise? Would they be willing to partner with us and donate some of this expertise to help us become more efficient? And that's fantastic.
On the other side, for them, the value that they get out is like their corporate social responsibility, or as part of the emerging ESG that's coming about as well, in terms of what they can talk about, which becomes I suppose, an employee attraction and engagement strategy as well. So, but the different channels, I feel like, listening to us sort of give our experiences, these different channels do require the for-purpose organisation to have a very intentional strategy or direction about volunteering, and then
I think so, yes.
Understanding how that is resourced in order for that to be activated in a really meaningful way. So it's not just, we want volunteers, and then you sort of try every option. It's we want volunteers, and this is the purpose why we have volunteers, and this is the type of work we want volunteers to do, and then this is the best channel for us to engage in to be able to attract volunteers to meet the purpose of what we're seeking.
I think you need to look at what you're doing. So what are you doing as an organisation? Where could you do it better? Where could you be more efficient? Do you have those skills in-house? Do you have the systems in-house? Do you have the funds in-house? And so it might be that it's looking at your resources. And then I think it's also looking at who has them. So I think if you're, looking at your sector, is there a university course in that sector? But also some of the jobs, right? If it's someone to come in and answer the phones, and you want someone every morning for 3 hours and every afternoon for 3 hours, then you're probably going to be more flexible as to who comes in and does that. And it might be that you get a range of different people. They might get some retirees, you might get some students, you can be more flexible on that. So I think one of the key things then is, what do you need done? What could be done by volunteers? It doesn't have to be done in-house. And then almost checking, do you have like job descriptions, or task descriptions, to make sure that the volunteer themselves is stepping into a clearly defined role. So then they're also feeling good. They can be onboarded properly, and then you are able to manage your volunteers really well as well.
That then leads to, once you've then got the volunteers in place, as the CEO, Michelle, I think you were talking about then having like an informal checklist. What are the types of things that you'd say a CEO needs to consider once they've got the volunteers in place or about to put volunteers in place?
I think you look at, who do you have? Like if you've come in and you're new, do you have volunteers? What do they do? And I think it's very much also then about looking and understanding how they're managed, like who manages them, how are they onboarded, and really importantly, actually, I don't think we've mentioned this yet, are their hours tracked? Because you really want to show the value that the volunteers are bringing to your organisation. And I think tracking hours in hopefully a not painful way, like no one loves to track their hours, but I think if you can track the number of volunteers you've had, the number of volunteers out, that's a hugely powerful metric to then show to corporate partners who are donating those hours, or to funders that you're leveraging all available resources. So I think really making sure that your volunteer hours are tracked is really important as well. As a CEO, make sure that there are systems in place that track those hours. Very much so. I think the other thing we didn't talk about actually is part of that recruitment often as well is volunteers needing to do something like a working with children check or a criminal check. And I think the simplest way I think about this is if they're the things that your employees have to do, then consider whether or not it's appropriate. It may very well be, is I'm leading to make sure that you also ask your volunteers to do that and don't just assume that you can hire. I think the recruitment of volunteers is quite a skill. You need to get that right. And then your responsibility, obviously, to them as an organisation, like you need to provide them with a safe working environment in the same way you need to provide a safe working environment to your employees. I mean, they're hugely beneficial, but they really also, you need to make sure as the CEO they're managed appropriately.